Sometimes life seems to want to tear us apart just when we start to align ourselves. Everything seemed in order, everything seemed on track, and suddenly the ground gives way. Certainties fall apart, signs disappear, and we are left there, staring into the void, trying to understand why, right now, everything seems so wrong. But what if this is not the end? What if it is exactly the opposite? What if it is the silent sign that you are much closer than you imagine? Napoleon Hill said that the universe, before blessing someone, tests their spirit, not to punish, but to refine, to shape, to prepare, because the mind needs to be trained, the heart enlarged, the vibration elevated, and what seems like disorder is often an invisible realignment, a subtle dance between what is dying and what is being born. It is as if God steps back for a moment, just to see if you really trust, if you are really ready to move on. Even when there are no more guarantees, there is a point in the journey where everything you believed seems to fail, where methods don't work, where paths close, where hope wavers. This point is known as the dark night of the soul, a liminal space between what was and what will be, a space where nothing is seen, but where everything is being gestated. Hill called this the test of purpose. Andrew Carnegie said that true gold is tested in fire, and that is exactly what happens in this interval. You are tested, not to be punished, but to discover the strength that is already within you. It is natural to think that you have failed, that you made a mistake, that something went very wrong, but failure at this stage is just an illusion. It is a filter, a vibrational portal, a sieve that separates what is superficial from what is essential. Only those who maintain coherence in the midst of scarcity are ready to overflow with abundance. Because abundance is not just an external event, it is an internal field. And this field is activated when you remain, even when everything seems to want you to give up. Most people give up at exactly that point, when they are about to reach it, when the field is almost ready, when the vibration is almost compatible, but the brain at that moment collapses. It fears frustration. It tries to protect. And without realizing it, you start sabotaging what is to come. You start to retreat. You start to doubt. And everything falls apart. But the great, the truly great, do not retreat. They cross over. Jesus crossed over. Moses crossed over. Mandela crossed over. Hill crossed over. They all faced silence. They all faced abandonment. They all faced chaos. And it was at that very place that their spirit expanded. Because there is no revelation without crossing over. There is no blessing without transformation. And all transformation, before showing itself outside, happens inside. What you are experiencing now may not be an end. Perhaps it is the threshold. Perhaps it is the last fold before the new. And if so, then this video is the reminder your soul needed to hear. You are so much closer than you think, so much more ready than you believe, so much more worthy than your mind tries to convince you you are not. And all you need now is to stay. Stay, even without a sign. Stay, even without certainty. Stay, even without guarantees. Because it is in that place, in the place where everyone gives up, that true creators reveal themselves. And it is there, right there, that the blessing finally bends and arrives and embraces and transforms because you stayed. And that was enough. The vibrational error of trying to understand chaos. There comes a time in the transformation process when the mind begs for logic. It wants explanations. It wants reasons. It wants to know why everything is falling apart. It wants to understand the meaning of pain, the reason for waiting, the reason for silence. And it is at this exact moment that the most common vibrational error occurs, that of trying to understand with a logical mind something that can only be traversed with the expanded consciousness of the soul. The mind wants maps. It wants coordinates. It wants a safe plan, but the soul does not move by maps. It moves by frequency, and frequency is not understood. Frequency is felt, it is inhabited, it is sustained. That is why when you try to understand chaos, you are trying to control it. You are trying to place it in mental categories to feel safer, but chaos by nature does not fit into labels. It exists to break them, to deconstruct, to dissolve the old, to prepare the field for the new. Napoleon Hill knew this. He understood that the vibrational transition is a terrain where logic cannot reach, where linear thinking falls apart, where only surrender sustains. Because reason is limited. It is based on what has already been. It seeks references in the past, but what is being born in you has never existed before, and so it cannot be understood. It can only be felt and sustained. Trying to understand chaos is like trying to measure the sea with a glass. It is frustrating. It is useless. It is exhausting. And worse, it generates vibrational noise. Because every attempt at control creates tension. And where there is tension, there is no flow. Where there is tension, there is no reception. Where there is tension, the blessing waits. It waits for you to let go. It waits for you to trust. It waits for you to accept that chaos is not to be understood, it is to be traversed. The soul evolves in the silence of surrender, in the space between words, in the interval between an attempt at explanation and the surrender that says, I don't know, but I go on. And it is this, I go on, that reconfigures everything, because it activates a new vibration, a new frequency, a new energetic code, a code that says, even without understanding, I trust. Even without proof, I remain. You don't need to understand chaos. You just need to not identify with it. You just need to not fight it. You just need to allow it to do what it came to do, empty you of the old, so that the new finally has space. And this space is what God calls the point of blessing, where you no longer need to control, because you finally have learned to trust. Why your reality collapses before expansion. There is a silent but recurring phenomenon that precedes every major transformation. A moment when everything seems to fall apart, where paths close, plans fall apart, supports disappear. It is a collapse that does not warn, that does not ask for permission, that simply arrives, deconstructs, disorganizes, and behind it, there is a profound spiritual and neurological principle. Before expanding, reality needs to get rid of what is no longer coherent, what can no longer support the next level. In neuroscience, this is called synaptic pruning. It is when the brain begins to dissolve old connections to make room for new neural pathways. It happens in childhood. It happens in adolescence. And it happens every time you are about to take a vibrational leap. Your system reorganizes itself. Your connections realign. But for that to happen, what is old needs to die. And death, even symbolic death, never comes without noise. It never comes without shock. Napoleon Hill went through this collapse many times, in phases where it seemed like everything he believed was wrong, in moments when no one listened to him, in cycles where all the doors were closed. But he did not interpret these periods as failure. He saw them as reconfiguration, as part of the process, as a natural phase between one state and another. And so he did not collapse with it. He observed, he adjusted, he waited. The external collapse is a reflection of an internal expansion that does not yet have a form. It is like the butterfly's cocoon. From the outside, it looks like inertia. It looks like a crisis. But inside, everything is being redesigned. The old body is falling apart. The new structure is forming. And that is exactly why it hurts. Because what was no longer useful, but what will be, has not yet arrived. The mind, upon seeing this, becomes alarmed. It thinks it is losing, but the spirit knows. It is just being cleansed, prepared, refined, to receive something greater, something more aligned, something truer. And this preparation is not always smooth, because it requires detachment. It requires trust without guarantees. It requires permanence even when everything seems empty. So if your reality is collapsing, don't run, don't fight. Don't try to fix everything immediately. Breathe, observe, listen to what is trying to be born, because what seems like the end is the beginning. What seems like chaos is an invisible construction, And what seems like disorder is the universe reorganizing your life so that it can finally accommodate what you have asked for so much, not in the old form, but in the new frequency, in the vibration that you are now ready to sustain. The paradox of frequency. You vibrate scarcity when you are about to receive. There is a vibrational irony that few realize, but that precedes almost every great blessing. Just when you are about to receive, your field begins to contract, your mind begins to doubt, your body stiffens, your emotions are agitated, and without realizing it, you begin to vibrate at the opposite frequency of what is coming your way. It is as if, at the moment closest to materialization, you activate the frequency of scarcity for fear of losing that which has not yet arrived. This happens because the closer you are to something great, the more your internal defense system goes on alert. The mind fears the unknown. It fears the possibility of frustration, and in an almost automatic movement, it begins to protect itself from what it considers risk. But what it calls risk is precisely the possibility of expansion. And in this silent conflict, you begin to emit a vibration that repels what was already on its way. Napoleon Hill understood this paradox deeply. He knew that the field does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you vibrate. And that is why he insisted so much on the importance of emotional consistency. Because there is no point in wishing for something and vibrating fear. There is no point in affirming something and carrying distrust. There is no point in visualizing something and walking with a shrunken heart. The field feels what you feel, not what you say. This is where many block their own blessing, because proximity activates the fear of loss, and fear of loss generates tension, and tension blocks reception. It is like a door that only opens gently. The more force you exert, the more it resists. The more fear you emanate, the more the universe waits, not for punishment, but for coherence. Because blessings do not flourish in tense soil. They need space, surrender, acceptance. Recognizing this paradox is the first step to transcending it, realizing that contraction is natural, but it does not need to be sustained. That fear can arise, but it does not need to command. That doubt may arise, but it does not have to become the dominant vibration. You can choose, you can breathe, you can realign, and by doing so, you become compatible with what you asked for. Being ready to receive does not mean feeling ready all the time. It just means holding the frequency. Even with your heart racing, it means trusting. Even with your mind agitated, it means making space. Even when your body wants to close itself off. Because it is this choice, made repeatedly, that keeps the channel open, that keeps the field clear, that keeps the blessing on course. And when it arrives, and it will arrive, you will no longer doubt, because you will realize that what separated you from it was never time, it was only frequency, and that now you are not only close, you are ready, whole, aligned, capable of receiving without fear of losing, because what vibrates in truth is not lost, ever. How the universe tests your vibration before releasing the blessing. There is a point in the journey where the blessing is already in the field, has already been created, is already vibrating nearby, but has not yet manifested. And at that point, the universe seems to pause. It is silent, not because it has forgotten about you, but because it is listening to you. It is feeling your vibration. It is observing with energetic precision what you emanate when no one is looking. And that is when the test happens. Not as punishment, but as vibrational confirmation. The universe tests your vibration not to measure how much you want something, but to feel where that desire is coming from. If it comes from trust or lack, if it comes from presence or absence, if it comes from inner certainty or from the attempt to fill a hole. Because what you emanate is more important than what you say, and the blessing does not respond to your declared will. It responds to the sustained frequency. Napoleon Hill understood this with rare lucidity. For him, the test was not proof that something was wrong. It was a sign that something was about to materialize. It was a kind of energetic diagnosis, a silent check. Are you really ready for what you asked for? Is your vibration compatible with what you say you want? Can your field sustain what is coming? And if the answer was yes, then the invisible bowed to the visible. But if it was no, the universe waited. It just waited, because it does not deliver before its time. It protects what is sacred from still unsteady hands. These tests come in subtle forms: an unexpected delay, a misunderstanding, a sudden loss, a day when everything seems to stop. At these times, the mind is agitated, emotions are destabilized, but the real vibration reveals itself. And that is what matters. The universe is not impressed by statements. It feels what is behind them. It feels if there is faith or just hope, if there is presence or just expectation, if there is surrender or just a desire for control. If you are being tested now, know that this is not a setback. It is proximity. It is a final tuning. It is God, the field, the universe, calling you to the ultimate alignment. And this alignment requires no effort. It requires truth. It requires a sincere return to your center. It requires that you hold what you have asked for, even before you see it. That you vibrate what you want to receive, even when everything seems to say it will not happen. This is the point where many give up, where many retreat, where many disconnect. But it is also the point where creators remain, where the conscious take a deep breath, realign themselves, and choose to hold, even without an answer, even without certainty, because they know that the test is just the last step before the overflow. And when you pass this test with presence, something changes, because your vibration changes. And with it, everything around you begins, little by little, to reflect this new truth, because the universe finally recognizes you do not just want the blessing, you are vibrating like it. And so, it arrives, it manifests, it remains, because now it is part of who you have become. The sabotage cycle: why you push away what you want most. There is a subtle moment, almost imperceptible, when you start to push away what you want most. And the most painful thing is that you don't even realize it. Your mind is saying, I want it, but your vibration is screaming, I don't deserve it. This conflict creates a field of energetic sabotage, a silent rupture between what you want and what you truly believe is possible for you. And that's when the cycle sets in. The threshold theory of worthiness explains this clearly. It's as if there is an invisible ceiling inside you, an unconscious limit to how much you allow yourself to receive, live, manifest. And every time something starts to cross that limit, your internal system activates. It starts to sabotage. It starts to block. It starts to retreat, not because you don't want it, but because at some deep level, you still don't feel worthy. Napoleon Hill saw this repeatedly in his own journey and in the people around him. Those who sought the most were often the ones who boycotted themselves the most, not for lack of faith, but for excess conditioning, for old stories, for voices from the past telling you that it wasn't that bad, that it couldn't be that easy, that it wasn't for you. And these voices become a pattern. They become a filter. They become a frequency. This cycle is treacherous because it disguises itself as rationality. You start to postpone decisions, to doubt opportunities, to diminish your own brilliance, to not follow that impulse that came from your heart. Everything seems justifiable, but deep down, it's fear. Fear of losing, fear of not being able to cope, fear of being disappointed again. And this fear, even hidden, vibrates, and this vibration repels. The unconscious mind is powerful. If it doesn't see itself as worthy, it closes the doors. It doesn't matter how much you affirm, visualize, or wish. It will find a way to keep everything within what it believes to be safe. And what it calls safe is often just familiar. It's the old. It's the small. It's the familiar discomfort. Getting out of this cycle starts with awareness, with honesty, with the deep recognition that you do have invisible vibrational limits, but they are not eternal truths. They are just old versions of yourself, and every version can be updated. When you start holding, little by little, the energy of worthiness, when you stop running from who you are becoming, when you choose to no longer retreat. You don't have to fight the sabotage. You just have to love what it is trying to protect, and then show your system that it is now safe to receive, that it is now safe to be happy, that it is now safe to expand, because you're no longer stuck in that old limit. You are creating a new field, a new pattern, a new vibration. And this time, you will not stop at almost, because now you know, and knowing transforms. Knowing liberates. Knowing paves the way to finally allow what you desire most to arrive and stay. Beware of the almost, the most dangerous stage of manifestation. Few moments are as challenging as the almost, that phase in which everything seems to be aligning, in which the signs have started to appear, in which the heart feels that fulfillment is near, but nothing has yet materialized. The almost is a liminal zone, a space between the seed and the flower, between faith and matter. And paradoxically, it is the most dangerous point of the journey, because it is when the ego panics. The ego does not deal well with uncertainty. It endures the beginning of the journey. It manages to remain active in the construction, but when it realizes that it no longer has control, that the harvest depends on total trust, it begins to sabotage. And this happens because the almost reveals a vulnerability that the ego tries to hide, the fear that everything will go wrong, the fear of getting so close and still losing. Napoleon Hill knew this stage well. He spent years on this frontier, always almost being recognized, always almost being published, always almost being heard. And it was precisely in this almost that he learned the difference between the vibrational creator and the emotional survivor. The first crosses over, the second retreats. The first sustains, the second gives up. It is in the almost that many blessings are postponed, not because they were not ready, but because those who asked for them did not sustain the field, because doubt overcame vibration, because haste disorganized time, because the fear of losing was stronger than the confidence in already being. And so what was close moves away, not as punishment, but due to incompatibility. The crossing of the almost requires emotional firmness. It is not an external test. It is an internal tuning. It is the moment when the universe asks, without words, "Are you really ready? Do you really trust? Do you sustain what you asked for even when everything seems to be at a standstill?" And your answer does not come from words. It comes from vibration. It comes from the state you choose to maintain while the invisible finishes manifesting. The almost is not a delay. It is a refinement. It is the final adjustment. It is the time when the field stabilizes, where the ego surrenders, where the soul takes over. And whoever manages to remain at this point, without collapsing, without forcing, without running away, crosses over, not only for what they asked for, but for who they have become. And this becoming is the true blessing. Because once you cross the almost, you will never be the same again. And because of this, everything around you also changes. Because you finally stopped doubting what was already yours. And this alone opens all the doors. The silence of the invisible. When God removes all signs, there is a silence that is not absence. It is preparation, a space of profound silence where all references disappear. Signs cease. Confirmations stop. Intuition seems muted. The connection that was once clear now seems distant, and everything in you screams for a sign, for anything that shows you are still on the right path. But this silence, as disconcerting as it may be, is not abandonment. It is expansion. It is like the moment when the arrow is pulled back. The tension increases. The movement seems to be of retreat, but it is precisely this retreat that precedes the flight. The deeper the bow is pulled, the further the arrow can go. And God, the universe, the field, sometimes remove the signs not to confuse you, but to push you. Because if you need to see in order to move forward, you are not yet vibrating with maturity. But if you can move forward even without seeing, then you are ready to fly. Napoleon Hill experienced this silence many times. He called it a vibrational vacuum, a period in which everything seemed frozen. Nothing was happening outside, but inside, a force was building up. A subtle clarity was born. He didn't know exactly what was coming, but he knew that something was being realigned. And so he remained, even without feeling, even without knowing, even without any certainty. This silence is a test not of your spoken faith, but of your vibrated faith. Not of what you say you believe, but of what you sustain when there is no turning back. It is a cosmic pause where the invisible adjusts everything, where you are called to continue even when there are no more references. And this continuation is not an external movement. It is an internal permanence. It is the state of someone who no longer depends on proof to vibrate with truth. Silence is an invitation to trust in the invisible, to anchor yourself in that which already vibrates within you, even if the world does not show it. To remember that the absence of signs is not the absence of presence. It is the sign that presence now moves on a more subtle level, deeper, more aligned with the essence. And if you are in this silence right now, breathe, come back to your center, stay, because the arrow is being pulled, because the soul is being expanded, because the blessing is approaching silently. And when it breaks the silence, it will not come as an answer. It will come as a confirmation of who you have become when nothing seemed to happen. And that confirmation will be irrefutable, because it will be you, whole, ready, realigned, vibrating with everything that before you were just waiting for. Why your life becomes disorganized before it aligns. Just before clarity, there is a whirlwind. Before order, chaos. Before the perfect fit, the feeling of falling apart. And this is not a failure of the process. It is part of the process. Because real alignment requires space. And space only opens up when disorganization fulfills its function. When what was poorly positioned, forced, sustained by fear or convenience, needs to fall. Life does not become disorganized because it made a mistake. It becomes disorganized because it is correcting. It dismantles what was built out of coherence. It dissolves what was maintained by the stubbornness of the ego. It interrupts what was fed by lack. Everything that is not in resonance with the new version that is emerging begins to collapse. And this collapse, as painful as it may seem, is healing. It is cleansing. It is vibrational reorganization. Napoleon Hill said that the comfort zone is one of the greatest enemies of manifestation, because as long as you cling to what you know, even if it limits you, you prevent the new from coming in. And the new needs space. It needs truth. It needs freedom to move. That's why life sometimes takes things away, not to punish, but to liberate, not to hurt, but to make way. Not to break, but to align. The apparent disorganization is actually an energetic reallocation. It's reality saying, this place can't hold what's coming anymore. It's like a room being emptied before it's redecorated. You look and see a mess, but behind it, there's a plan. There's a new harmony being prepared, and you'll only see it when you stop resisting the process. Yes, there will be losses. Yes, there will be confusion. Yes, there will be days when nothing seems to make sense, but if you can stay present on those days, you'll see alignment come, because chaos is temporary, but truth always finds a way, and when it does, everything that seemed meaningless begins to fall into place. It begins to blossom. It begins to show that what fell was never a foundation. It was just an old structure supporting an identity that no longer exists. Your life is not falling apart, it is aligning, but alignment requires courage. The courage to let go, the courage to stay in the void for a while, the courage to trust that, even without understanding, there is something being organized, something bigger, something more yours, something that you don't need to build, just allow. Because when there is permission, the universe no longer needs to push you, it just guides you, and the path, finally, opens up, inside, and then outside, always in that order. The test of vibrational patience. Haste is one of the greatest sources of vibrational noise. And the paradox is this: the closer you are to receiving, the more time seems to drag on. The longer the days get, the more the silence weighs. And that is precisely where the test of vibrational patience comes in. Not as a game, not as a punishment, but as a final calibration, a tuning between what you want and what you already are. Nature understands this perfectly. No seed germinates out of time. No flower rushes to bloom. No fruit ripens under pressure. Everything blooms when it is ready, when there is nourishment, when there is a favorable environment, and above all, when there is patience. The patience that does not wait anxiously, but with presence. The patience that does not demand, but trusts. The patience that does not try to speed up, because it knows that the blessing arrives at the right frequency, not at the desired speed. Napoleon Hill wrote about persistence with the same reverence with which others spoke of faith, because for him, persistence was holding the field. It was about sustaining the state. It was about going through time without contaminating the vibration. And this is only possible when you understand that time is not an enemy. Time is a space for refinement. Time does not stop you. It prepares you. When you feel that nothing is happening, that everything has stopped, that the universe has forgotten you, know this: that is exactly when you are being observed. Sense for life, sense for the invisible, because your reaction to time reveals your energetic maturity. When you wait in peace, you are ready. When you wait in despair, the field is still noisy. The test of patience is not about how long you can hold on. It is about how you choose to vibrate as time passes. If you complain, get angry, give up, the field feels it. If you breathe, hold on, welcome, the field feels it and reacts. Because time, in fact, does not respond to the clock. It responds to the frequency. When you align, time doubles. What seemed distant comes closer. What seemed slow speeds up. What seemed impossible smoothly happens. Not because you pressed, but because you finally became fertile soil, vibrationally fertile, internally ready. And this state cannot be forced. It is cultivated with patience, with constancy, with the serenity of someone who knows that every blessing has a time, and that this time is never late. It just waits for you to be ready to receive and to remain. What happens on the invisible plane while you feel abandoned? There is a type of loneliness that does not come from the absence of people. It comes from the feeling that even the universe has moved away, that even God has gone silent, that life has stopped listening to you. And when this feeling appears, it is not just emotional, it is vibrational. It creates an echo within the chest, a feeling of being out of tune, of being disconnected. But what you call abandonment, the invisible plane calls reprogramming. While you feel like nothing is happening, everything is being redesigned at levels that the mind cannot reach. Your vibrational field is being adjusted. Your frequencies are being recalibrated. Your unconscious patterns are being reinterpreted. Silence is not a vacuum. It is movement in another dimension. And that is why it requires trust, because what is being aligned cannot be seen. It can only be sustained with faith. Napoleon Hill went through this type of silence many times. In his most challenging phases, he reported feeling no inspiration or direction. But he knew that these periods were precisely the most fertile, the most powerful, because it is when everything seems to stand still that the real process of transmutation takes place. It is in the invisible that the visible is born. It is in the darkness that the new light begins to pulsate. When life puts you in this space, it is not punishing you, it is cleansing you. It is disconnecting you from patterns that cannot follow what is to come. It is teaching your body to trust beyond logic. It is tuning your mind to more subtle frequencies. And this, yes, may seem like abandonment, because the ego hates what it does not understand, but the soul recognizes. It knows, it feels, it remains. While you think nothing is happening, there are connections being reactivated within you. There are memories being released. There are old cords being cut. There are portals being opened, not outside, but inside. Inside you. because that is where everything begins. And that is why the apparent abandonment is, in fact, a sacred retreat, a gesture from the divine saying, "Now it's just between us. If you are in this moment, allow yourself to be, without forcing a way out, without seeking distractions, without demanding a vibration that is not yet ready. Just breathe, just feel, just listen to what does not yet have a form, because there is a part of you being healed right now, a part that needs this silence to finally be able to listen again, trust again, create again, not from despair, but from truth, from presence, from the frequency that arises not from noise, but from the deepest silence, where even without signs, you were never alone, never. And now, start to remember that, how your physical body responds to the approach of a quantum leap. There is something sacred about the body, something that the mind does not fully understand, but that the soul immediately recognizes. When a profound transformation is about to happen, it is not just your mind that prepares itself. Your body feels it too. Your nervous system responds. Your vital energy begins to reorganize itself. And so it is common to feel tired for no reason, pain that cannot be explained, sleepless nights, a feeling of exhaustion that seems to have no logic. But there is a logic. The body is the first grounding field for the spirit. And when you are about to experience a quantum leap, a profound realignment of life, purpose, and frequency, your body needs to adapt. It needs to make room to accommodate the new vibration. It needs to release what was stagnant. It needs to physically process everything that the soul is transcending spiritually. Napoleon Hill understood that the body was more than an instrument. It was an ally. It was a sensor of the invisible. And that is why he respected the moments of silence of the body, the days of unexplained tiredness, the moments when productivity decreased, because he knew, in these moments, the body is metabolizing the invisible. It is integrating changes that have not yet reached the surface. This integration requires energy, and that is why the body gets tired. It requires rest, and that is why sleep changes. It requires cleansing, and that is why inexplicable pains can arise. All of this is a reaction to a new frequency that is trying to establish itself. And if you try to force the body to continue at the same pace as before, you create resistance. You block it. You interrupt the process. Respecting the body in these moments is an act of vibrational wisdom. It is recognizing that you are changing on all levels, that the transformation is not only emotional or spiritual, it is cellular, it is energetic, it is profound, and there is no quantum leap without physical impact, because the new version of you needs a new container, and the container is your body. When you feel like you can't take it anymore, maybe it is the body saying, "We are almost there, just a little more." When everything seems heavy, maybe it's because you're carrying an old field that's about to dissolve. And when you allow yourself to pause, breathe, feel, you create space. And in that space, the new frequency settles in. Soft, subtle, but undeniably real. Your body is not failing. It's aligning itself. It's preparing to support what's coming. And what's coming isn't small. It's new. It's big. It's yours. And it needs a present, light, available body. A body that knows that rest is also part of the process. That tiredness is also a sign of healing. That exhaustion is also a passage. And that, at the end of this passage, something in you and through you will blossom with more light, with more strength, with more truth, because you allowed it, because you listened, because you finally welcomed it. Emotional faith, when believing without feeling, no longer works. For a long time, you may have believed that all you had to do was think positively, that all you had to do was affirm, repeat, and declare, that all you had to do was keep your faith, even if you didn't feel it. And maybe on some level, that sustained you. But there comes a point in your journey when the universe no longer responds to words alone. It responds to vibration. And at that point, faith needs to stop being mental and become emotional. It needs to descend from the intellect to the body, from speech to heart, from intention to frequency. Emotional faith is not about saying you believe. It's about feeling with your whole body that what you seek is already true. It's when your field begins to vibrate with the silent certainty that what you desire already exists, even before it manifests. And this certainty is not born of effort. It is born of inner coherence, of the alignment between what you feel, what you think, and what you do. Napoleon Hill wrote that belief is the starting point of all achievement, but he was not talking about belief as a concept. He was talking about belief as a sustained frequency, as a vibration that is maintained even when everything around you says otherwise. And this is only possible when faith is not just in the mind, but anchored in the emotions, when the entire body begins to vibrate the desired reality. Believing without feeling is like trying to turn on a light bulb without power. The intention is there, the desire is there, but the circuit is not completed. And the field does not activate, because the field only activates with vibrational coherence, when what you think resonates with what you feel, and what you feel begins to manifest in what you experience. This requires truth. It requires courage to look at what really vibrates within you, because often, behind the declaration of faith, there is fear. Behind the positive affirmation, there is doubt. Behind the "I believe," there is a "what if it doesn't happen?" And this hidden layer is what the universe listens to. Because the universe does not respond to what you say, it responds to who you are. Emotional faith is becoming what you want to see. It is starting to live as someone who has already received, breathing as someone who already trusts, acting as someone who already knows, not as an act, but as a real state, as an intimate frequency, as a daily choice, even when nothing outside confirms, even when everything seems to be at a standstill, because this is the point at which faith stops being a belief and becomes a vibrational code, a code that, once activated, changes everything, because when you vibrate faith, the time doesn't matter, the scenario doesn't matter, the apparent delay doesn't matter, the field opens, the invisible responds, matter begins to bend, and reality, little by little, reorganizes itself, not to reward your faith, but to reflect your new vibration, because you are no longer asking, you are being, and whoever is already on the path to what you have been waiting for, not as someone who waits, but as someone who vibrates, and creates, and receives, because you have become your own channel. The illusion of loss as preparation for receiving. Few pains are as disconcerting as losing something we love, losing a plan that seemed right, losing a stability that sustained us. When this happens, it is common to think that something went wrong, that life failed, that the universe missed its target. But often, loss is just the first step towards a greater receiving. It is not absence. It is opening. It is preparation. Loss realigns. It undoes structures that seemed solid but were already obsolete. It removes what no longer vibrates with the new version that is being born within you. It interrupts what was out of coherence with your highest path. And this hurts, because the mind does not understand, because the heart resists, because the ego clings. But the soul knows. It knows that nothing is taken away. Everything is replaced. Napoleon Hill understood this not with theory, but with experience. He lost many times. He lost status. He lost opportunities. He lost people. But looking back, each loss repositioned him. Each pain pushed him to a new state of consciousness. And from that state, he was able to receive things that would not fit before, because the new reality needed a new space. And loss, often, is the beginning of that space. It is necessary to change the lens, to see loss not as punishment, but as pruning. Like the gardener who cuts branches not out of cruelty, but to allow more light, to make way, to strengthen the root. When something leaves your life, no matter how precious it seems, it is because it can no longer walk with you, or because you have grown, or because it has already fulfilled its purpose. The hardest part is to trust this process while it happens, because there are no immediate guarantees. There is silence, there is emptiness, there is longing. But if you can stay in that space without hardening yourself, something new begins to sprout. First in the field, then in the body, and finally in matter. Because the universe does not leave empty spaces for long. It only cleanses to fill with what is most yours. Losing is giving up what seemed right, to receive what is true. And the true does not require effort. It fits. It reveals itself. It blooms. But for that, you need to let go. Breathe. Let go. Even without understanding. Even with pain. Even with tears. Because every time something goes, something bigger is approaching. Something more aligned, more vibrant, more coherent with who you are becoming. And when that something arrives, you understand that the loss was never a loss. It was a passage. It was a transition. It was expansion in disguise. And what seemed like the end was just the beginning of the new, of the full, of the real that could only arrive because you had the courage to let go. And that changes everything. The false spirituality that weakens your frequency. Not all light is true. Not all silence is peace. Not all gratitude is alignment. There is a form of spirituality that, instead of expanding, contracts. That instead of liberating, imprisons. That pretends to accept, but is only disguised repression. It is performative spirituality. The kind that says it is fine when inside everything begs to be heard. The kind that smiles on the outside, but implodes on the inside. The kind that repeats mantras, but denies emotions. And this denial weakens. False spirituality is made up of ready-made phrases, but with little truth. It promotes forced gratitude, the kind that does not come from the heart, but from the desperate attempt to appear evolved. It promotes toxic positivity, the kind that tells us to silence pain instead of embracing it. It promotes the Zen state as an obligation when the soul is crying out for real presence, for authentic listening, for permission to feel. Napoleon Hill knew that the power of the mind only manifests itself when there is coherence. And coherence does not mean the absence of pain. It means integrating pain into the process. It means feeling truthfully without drowning, recognizing fear without giving in to it, naming sadness without getting lost in it. Because true spirituality is inclusion. It is wholeness. It is presence with everything you are, not just with what is pretty to show. The highest frequency is not the one that seems perfect. It is the one that is whole, the one that vibrates with authenticity, the one that sustains its own truth even when it hurts. Because this truth, when accepted, transforms, and this transformation raises the vibration. Because where there is truth, there is movement, and where there is movement, there is flow. And where there is flow, creation happens. You don't have to be light all the time. You have to be real. You have to be whole. You have to be honest with what pulses within you. Because the soul does not flourish in the rigidity of performance. It flourishes in the softness of listening, in the embrace of shadows, in the courage to not pretend to be at peace when your chest is in a storm. Spirituality is not an aesthetic state. It is a vibrational state. And this state is only sustained when emotion finds space to exist, when the body can express itself, when the heart can breathe without masks. It is in this space that the true light is lit, not as an imposition, but as a consequence, not as an image, but as an essence. And it is from this light, which does not pretend, which does not force, which simply is, that your frequency is strengthened, because finally, there is coherence between what you feel, what you vibrate, and what you manifest. And this coherence is the bridge to everything you so long for, everything you so deserve, everything that silently is already in the field, waiting only for this truth, for this presence, for this reunion with who you in fact are, without filters, without performance, just you. And that is more than enough. Why you need to lose control before you can manifest. Control is the urge of fear, the fear that something will go wrong, the fear that life will forget about you, The fear that if you're not in control, everything will fall apart. And it's understandable. The mind has learned to survive this way, creating plans, routines, strategies. But true manifestation is not born from control. It is born from trust. And this trust only blossoms when control is finally released. Losing control is not about disorganizing your life. It is about surrendering control to what is greater. It is about trusting the intelligence of the field, trusting the wisdom of the invisible, trusting that there is a rhythm, a logic, an order that goes beyond the understanding of the mind. Napoleon Hill said that the greatest achievements arise when there is vibrational surrender, when the desire is clear, but the attachment to how and when is released. As long as you insist on controlling everything, you limit the field of possibilities. You try to force the universe to move within your parameters, and the universe does not fit within these limits. It wants to surprise you. It wants to expand you. It wants to take you beyond what your mind can imagine. But to do so, it needs space. And space only opens up when control is released. This surrender is not passivity. It is presence. It is action with awareness, but without anxiety. It is movement with intention, but without tension. It is decision with purpose, but without attachment. When you act from surrender, your field aligns. Your body relaxes. Your vibration rises. Because there is no more struggle. There is no more demand. There is a gentle flow with what is. Control is the child of scarcity. It is born from the idea that if you don't do everything exactly right, you will lose something. But abundance does not respond to this logic. Abundance moves where there is space, where there is openness, where there is trust. It does not impose itself. It offers itself, and it only settles where it is welcome, where there is faith instead of rigidity, where there is flexibility instead of demand. And that is why so many manifestations only happen when, exhausted, you let go. When you say, "I did what I could, now I trust." At that moment, the field breathes. The blessing approaches, because control has given way to surrender. And surrender is the fertile soil of the miracle. It is the space where the new germinates, where the unexpected blooms, where reality changes, not because you forced it, but because you allowed it. And allowing is the verb of conscious creators, those who do not need to control, because they already vibrate like those who have already received. Even before seeing, even before touching, they already are. And that is enough. The energy of, "I don't know what to do anymore." There comes a time in the journey when all attempts have failed, all strategies have been exhausted, all paths seem to be closed. And then, with a tired heart, with tears in your eyes, with an exhausted soul, you say, "I don't know what to do anymore." And it is at that exact moment that something begins to open up. Because "I don't know" is not the end. It is the opening. It is the space where the ego finally falls silent, and the soul can finally speak. The "I don't know" dissolves the illusion of control. It breaks spiritual pride. It dismantles the mask of those who want to appear strong all the time. And what is left is the truth. A raw, naked truth, without embellishments. But also an open truth, available, receptive. And this receptivity is fertile ground. It is exactly what the universe needs to start acting. Napoleon Hill knew that the mind that is exhausted is the mind that can finally listen. Hear the subtle. Listen to your intuition. Listen to what you've been trying to say for a long time, but it was drowned out by the noise of haste, logic, and the need to control. The "I don't know what to do anymore" is the collapse of the ego, and every collapse is a portal, a space where the old no longer works and the new has not yet been born. But it is in this interval that the magic happens. The energy of exhaustion does not need to be seen as failure. It is often the sign that you have gone to the limit, that you have tried with everything you had, and now it is time to surrender, not as giving up, but as vibrational surrender, a state where the soul takes the helm, where you, in silence, say to the universe, "I allow, I open, I trust." This is where true manifestation is born, not from strategies, but from surrender, not from effort, but from clean vibration, not from searching, but from presence. Because when you no longer know what to do, you become a field, you become a channel, you become space, and it is in this space that the new enters. Soft, subtle, but transformative. So, if everything has stopped, if you no longer see a way out, maybe you are exactly where you should be, at the point of surrender, at the point of rebirth, at the point where you finally stop trying to create with force and start creating with frequency. And the frequency that is born of surrender is the most powerful of all, because it doesn't want to prove anything. It just wants to be, and being is all the universe needs to respond to you, because whoever is has already started to receive. Even before understanding, even before seeing, it is already happening, silently, deeply, inevitably. What to do when everything stops, and how to turn things around energetically. There are times when everything seems to stop. Doors close, answers disappear, and the path, once clear, becomes foggy. You try to move forward, but it's as if you're stuck in quicksand. Every effort seems in vain, and a feeling of stagnation sets in. In these moments, it's common to ask yourself, what am I doing wrong? Or why isn't anything working? But what if this pause is not a mistake, but an opportunity? Napoleon Hill, in his works, emphasizes that challenges are tests of our determination. He believed that success often lies just beyond the point at which most people give up. When everything seems to stop, it may be the universe asking you to realign your energy, to look within and reconnect with your essence. External stagnation often reflects an internal disconnection. It's a sign that something inside you needs to be adjusted. Maybe it's time to silence the external noise and listen to your intuition. Allow yourself to feel without judgment and acknowledge the emotions that arise. For it is in this space of authenticity that transformation begins. To energetically reverse this state, it is essential to create moments of conscious pause. Breathe deeply, allowing the air to cleanse not only your lungs but also your thoughts. Visualize yourself surrounded by a soft light, which dissolves blockages and renews your energy. Affirm to yourself, I trust the process of life. I am open to the possibilities that the universe has for me. Remember that life is made up of cycles. Just as nature has its seasons, we also go through periods of introspection and rebirth. The winter of the soul prepares the ground for the spring of the spirit. And even when everything seems to stand still, there is a subtle movement happening behind the scenes, aligning circumstances and preparing the ground for the new. So, when everything seems to be stuck, see it as an invitation to introspection, reconnection, and renewal. Trust that as you realign your energy and open yourself to the flow of life, the path will reveal itself, and you will realize that even in the pauses, there is a greater purpose guiding every step of your journey. The danger of accelerating divine time. There is a restlessness that arises not from the soul, but from the ego, a desire to make everything happen faster, to anticipate the cycle, to force the bud to bloom before its time. It is haste disguised as faith, anxiety dressed up as action, the impulse to accelerate divine time. But spiritual time does not respond to pressure. It responds to coherence, and coherence does not rush. It sustains itself. When you try to rush the manifestation, you are telling the universe, even if unconsciously, I don't trust that it will happen at the right time. And this lack of trust generates noise. It generates misalignment, because the frequency of haste is the frequency of scarcity. And the field cannot deliver abundance where scarcity still commands time. Napoleon Hill taught about persistence, but never about impatience. He knew that time is a part of the process, as sacred as desire itself, that there is a greater intelligence governing the movements. And forcing this intelligence is like trying to pull a fruit from a branch before it is ripe. You may succeed, but it won't have the flavor, nor the strength, nor the completeness of what was being prepared for you. Impatience is born from disconnection with the now. When you reject the present, you reject preparation. And those who reject preparation block the fullness of the harvest, because the harvest doesn't come only to those who ask. It comes to those who prepare, to those who align, to those who learn to love the process as much as they wait for the result. Divine time is not linear. It is vibrational. It moves at the pace of your inner maturity, of your true surrender, of your unconditional presence. And when you try to speed up this time, you are saying, I haven't learned to trust yet. But when you silence, when you accept, when you inhabit time as part of the blessing, then time bends. It molds. It responds. And suddenly, what seemed distant comes closer. What seemed slow speeds up. What seemed stuck dissolves. Not because you ran more, but because you stopped running, because you finally became vibrationally compatible with the time of the miracle. And the miracle is not rushed. It is exact. It is complete. It is yours. At the right time, in the right vibration, at the time when you finally understand that you didn't need to run, you just needed to trust. And that is what moves everything. The trap of wanting a blessing to escape pain. There is a profound difference between desiring a blessing and being vibrationally ready for it. Many people ask for healing, but they do so they no longer have to feel pain. They ask for abundance, but they do so they never have to face the fear of scarcity again. They ask for love, but only so they don't feel alone. And when desire is born from this place of escape, of denial, of fear, it carries an energy that contradicts the request itself. Because in this state, the blessing becomes anesthesia. And the universe doesn't work with anesthesia. It works with truths. Napoleon Hill knew that the greatest value of manifestation was not what you achieved, but who you became in the process, because it is the being, and not the desire, that sustains the blessing. And if you still seek the miracle to escape pain, you are telling the universe, I still haven't learned what this pain wants to show me. And that is why, many times, it remains, not as a punishment, but as a teacher. Pain, when denied, becomes a shadow. When ignored, it becomes sabotage. But when accepted, it becomes a bridge between what you were and what you are ready to be. And it is only when you stop running away from it and start listening to it, understanding it, integrating it, that the field opens up. Because the universe does not respond to the desire to escape, it responds to the vibration of acceptance. You do not receive the blessing because you no longer feel pain. You receive it because, even feeling it, you remain whole, present, conscious, aligned. The true blessing comes when you no longer need it to validate your existence, when it stops being salvation and becomes a consequence, when it no longer comes to fill a void, but to expand a completeness that you already cultivate within yourself. Desiring is not the problem. The problem is desiring in order to not feel, in order to not face, in order to not transform. Because the universe does not just want to give you something. It wants to transform you into someone who vibrates what you desire. And this transformation begins when you stop seeing pain as an obstacle and start seeing it as the key. The blessing does not come to erase what was. It comes to illuminate what you have become, even with what was. It is a celebration of your truth, of your courage, of your emotional maturity. And that is why it only comes when you stop running and start to feel, not to suffer anymore, but to finally free yourself. And when this liberation happens, the desire is purified, the vibration aligns, and the blessing, finally, approaches, not as a relief, but as a mirror. A reflection of your new state, a reflection of your reunion with pain, not as an enemy, but as a master. And in this reunion, everything changes because you, finally, stopped running and started to be. And being is what attracts everything. How to sustain vibration when nothing else sustains you. There are times when everything around you seems to be falling apart. Words lose their effect. Practices no longer work as they once did. The body gets tired. The mind wavers. The spirit becomes silent. And the external world no longer offers any visible support. It is at this point that many feel they are failing. But in truth, It is at this point that the soul is being summoned to sustain itself, to vibrate, even when everything seems lifeless. Sustaining vibration in the void is what distinguishes the conscious creator from the anxious seeker, because when everything is going well, staying high is natural, but when everything falls apart, staying present is art. It is a mastery. It is vibrational maturity. Napoleon Hill knew this. He called this moment the tipping point of the mind, a place where, if you give in, you collapse, but if you breathe, you transform. To sustain vibration in this state, you don't need to do more. You need to do something different. It's not about increasing your effort, but about refining your intention, getting back to the essential, getting back to what is true. And the truth, in these moments, is simple. You are still here, breathing, feeling, observing. This is already presence. This is already a point of support, because no matter how unstable everything seems, there is a center within you that does not move. And this center is your vibrational home. Use this moment to rediscover silence, to write from the heart without filters, to name what you feel without shame, to embrace yourself, not as someone who wants to correct themselves, but as someone who knows that everything is part of it. And from this space, practice strong presence. Not forced presence, but the one that comes from, I am here, even so. Napoleon Hill said that the greatest revelations arise when the world is silent, because it is in silence that the soul listens. It is in absence that the new insinuates itself. It is in the collapse of external supports that you find the only support that does not waver, your frequency. And this frequency is strengthened every time you choose, even in the midst of pain, even without guarantees, even without enthusiasm, to remain. Remain with what is, with what you feel, with what is alive in you now, and allow yourself to be grateful, not just for show, but with real gratitude. The kind that says, even in this state, I recognize that there is something greater going on inside me. Write this gratitude, one line a day, one moment at a time, because this practice, even if subtle, sustains, reorganizes, realigns, and little by little, what seemed impossible to bear begins to dissolve, because you're no longer waiting for something outside to sustain you. You are remembering that you are already the field itself. You are already the vibration itself. You are already the channel, and whoever vibrates, even when nothing else vibrates for you, is already creating, already healing, already calling the blessing closer. And it will come, because you are finally ready to sustain it, completely, inside, forever. The true sign that the blessing is near. There is a common expectation that when the blessing approaches, everything begins to align. The signs intensify, emotions rise, the external world begins to cooperate. But often, the true sign is exactly the opposite. Chaos increases, silence deepens, certainties are dissolved, and in the midst of this apparent collapse, the soul is called to remain. To remain not because everything is going well, but because something inside already knows, already feels, already vibrates. The universe does not send blessings as rewards. It sends them as reflections. Reflections of the frequency you sustain. And when you begin to sustain presence even in the face of chaos, when you begin to vibrate confidence even without guarantees, when you begin to give thanks even before you receive, that is the true sign, because the blessing does not arrive to change you. It arrives when you have already changed. Napoleon Hill said that adversity carries within itself the seed of an equivalent benefit, and this seed only germinates when you stop resisting what is, when you stop fighting the scenery and start becoming the field, because the field is what sustains the seed. And the field does not react to chaos. It vibrates beyond it. So if everything around you seems to be getting worse, if things are falling apart, if the silence has deepened, maybe you are exactly where you need to be. Because the blessing does not come when everything gets better. It comes when you improve your frequency, even when everything seems to be getting worse. It comes when the world is still chaotic, but you are already at peace. When time has not yet changed, but you have already become the now. This is the surest sign, the vibration that no longer depends on form, the faith that no longer waits for proof, the love that no longer needs permission to exist. It is here, in this inner place, that the blessing lands. Because here, you already are it, and what you already are only needs to be recognized. And then, it manifests softly, silently, exactly as it should be. The purpose of chaos: to refine, not to punish. The conditioned mind interprets chaos as punishment, as if pain were a consequence of something we did wrong, as if the lack of answers were a sign of unworthiness. But the soul knows. It knows that chaos is a tool, that discomfort is pedagogical, that confusion is not punishment. It is refinement, a silent call from life for you to reconnect with what is essential. Napoleon Hill wrote that every adversity carries within itself the seed of an equivalent benefit. And this phrase is not consolation, it is a map. Because chaos does not come to destroy, it comes to purify. It uproots what is false, it dismantles what is out of balance, it disorganizes what was sustained by force, not by truth. And in doing so, it makes room for something more authentic, more vibrant, more coherent with who you really are. Chaos is a conversation between the old and the new, an intense conversation, sometimes painful, but necessary, because the new does not settle in without noise. It needs to deconstruct what is crystallized. It needs to move what was paralyzed. It needs to dissolve what no longer supports its next version. And this movement, seen from the perspective of the ego, is discomfort. But seen from the perspective of the soul, it is liberation. Nothing that is real is lost in chaos. What is lost is what was already defeated, what had already stopped vibrating, what no longer followed your internal rhythm. And when you lose this, you are not being punished. You are being aligned, refined, prepared, because only those who go through the fire know the gold they carry. The purpose of chaos is not to distance you from the blessing, it is to bring you closer to it. But to do so, it needs to empty, cleanse, reorder. And this reordering is uncomfortable until it reveals its truth. Because when you no longer fear chaos, but listen to it, it stops being a threat, and it becomes a master, a silent master, firm but compassionate. That takes you, without detours, back to yourself. And there, in you, is where everything begins, where everything starts again, where everything finally blossoms. The greatest spiritual test: keep vibrating what you still can't see. It's not hard to stay centered when everything is visible, when the signs confirm, when the paths open, when life seems to cooperate. But the true spiritual test begins in the invisible, in the silence, in the absence of evidence, when what you feel is not yet reflected in the external world, when everything around you seems to deny what pulses within. And yet, you remain. Keep vibrating love, even when there is rejection. Keep vibrating abundance, even when the balance is scarce. Keep vibrating healing, even when your body still hurts. Keep, because something in you already knows, because something in you has already aligned, because the vibration has become your home, not your strategy, your state, not your technique, your nature, not your obligation. Napoleon Hill understood that the true power of the mind lies in holding an internal image so clearly that the external world has no choice but to bow to it. But this image cannot be just mental. It needs to be vibrational. It needs to be emotionally rooted. It needs to be felt with such truth that the field not only recognizes it, it obeys it. To vibrate the invisible is to live with your eyes closed to the world and open to your heart. It is to walk even without a map. It is to plant even without a season. It is to water even without a sprout. And to do this not out of stubbornness, but out of faith. Faith that is not passive waiting. It is subtle action. It is silent constancy. It is fidelity to that which has not yet shown itself, but already vibrates within you with the strength of who you already are. This is the greatest proof, and also the greatest portal, Because when you vibrate what you do not yet see, the universe realizes it is ready. It is ready. They no longer depend on form. They are coherence in movement. And it is this coherence, this fidelity to the invisible, that precedes the miracle, because those who vibrate before seeing manifest, because they have already become the reality they want to live, and reality only responds, always. The symbol of Chinese bamboo. Few symbols represent the time of blessing as beautifully and accurately as the Chinese bamboo. In the first years after planting, nothing happens on the surface. Nothing sprouts, nothing blooms, nothing shows itself. The soil remains seemingly empty, and yet the farmer continues to care for it, watering it, nourishing it, trusting it, because he knows, even though nothing can be seen, everything is happening. The roots are being formed, and when the bamboo finally breaks through the ground, it grows meters in a few weeks. But it wasn't fast. It was silent. The spiritual journey is like that. Long, invisible, silent. You plant, but you don't see it. You care, but nothing blooms. You pray, but the sky seems silent. And in this time, the time of the roots, many give up because they confuse silence with absence. They confuse invisibility with failure. They confuse waiting with refusal. But bamboo knows how to wait. Napoleon Hill lived years underground, without applause, without recognition, without certainties. And it was this time of invisibility, that prepared you, because there is no harvest without roots, and roots cannot be seen. Roots can be felt. Roots are sustained. Roots are chosen. Every day. When you are in this time of roots, the easiest thing to do is to doubt. The mind demands results. The ego wants proof. The world demands speed. But the soul asks for patience, because it knows that what grows quickly falls easily, and what is built in silence remains. When, finally, the blessing manifests itself, and it will manifest itself, it will come with strength, with stability, with presence, because it was sustained from the inside out. You are not standing still. You are creating roots. You are expanding the field. You are becoming capable of sustaining what you asked for. And when everything is ready, the invisible will break through the earth, not like magic, but as a consequence, as a harvest, as a vibrational response to your silent constancy. Remember, haste wants flowers, but wisdom plants bamboo, because bamboo is not only beautiful on the surface, he's strong inside. He is whole. He is deep, like you, like the blessing that comes, like the truth that no longer needs to prove anything to finally blossom. To change your reality, you need to be someone new before anything changes on the outside. Frequency comes first. This is the phrase that sums it all up. That sums up the path. That points out with serene clarity what we try so hard to find on the outside. Joe Dispenza said this with the precision of someone who knows the codes of the field. And Napoleon Hill lived it with the depth of someone who experienced the invisible bending to the vibrational state of an aligned mind. You don't change your reality because something outside has changed. You change because something inside has been reconfigured, because the old no longer serves, because the old no longer vibrates, because the version of you that you were can no longer sustain the reality you desire. And that's why before the blessing comes the crossing. Before the answer comes the silence. Before the harvest comes the time of the root. Frequency comes first, always, because the universe doesn't deliver what you want. It delivers what you are. And that's why insisting on methods, formulas, strategies, without changing the vibration doesn't work, because the field does not respond to your will. It responds to your truth. And your truth is not in the words you say. It is in the peace you sustain. It is in the surrender you practice. It is in the coherence you emanate, even when no one is watching. It is this frequency that anticipates form, that advances time, that attracts without seeking, that manifests without forcing. The transformation begins when you stop asking the world to change and start changing from within, when you decide to be the vibration of that which you so long for, when you choose to embody the miracle that has not yet arrived. Because when you do this, it is already here, in the form of presence, in the form of vibration, in the form of state. And this state is everything. It is from this that the new reality is born. It is in it that the blessing is anchored. It is from this that the universe conspires, not by magic, but by correspondence, because what you sustain sustains you. What you vibrate responds. What you are attracts. So breathe. You don't need to run. You just need to be. And being is already creating, silently, deeply, inevitably.